to Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio, and I'm your host, Janet Carroll Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin, and our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as the Mad Painter, and this is Revolution Radio, Studio B, and our guest today is Ryan Stacey. And Ryan Stacey is a certified private investigator, the president and CEO of Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services, and the former National Chief Investigator for MUFON Canada. Ryan is considered an expert in the UFO paranormal field and has been featured on television, has lectured at major conferences, and has had many articles published. He is writing his first book called Believe, an Investigative Study, Building a Bridge between the Borders of Paranormal and Extraterrestrial Phenomena. He has personally investigated over 800 paranormal UFO sightings internationally, and he's the founder of a volunteer group, the Experiencers Support Association, TESA, which assists anyone that has come into contact with apparitions, haunts, poltergeists, and other unusual phenomena associated with the subject. And Dr. Lessin, let's do a sound check. Are you there? Are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm noticing you're just talking about paranormal, and I imagine you are you steering clear of my military stuff, or is that within your purview too?
Was that a question
Welcome
towards
to
me?
the show, Ryan. Yes, I guess so. Sasha, launch us with the question.
So okay, let's just backtrack here. So Janet and I have talked before, and I'm not too familiar with my audience tonight. So if you could give me more information about your background, and then I'd be able to comment on that.
Go ahead, Sasha. You want to tell Ryan about yourself?
I'm just a radio interviewer, and I'm trying to learn about this subject.
Okay, so I'll fill in the gaps. Yeah.
What was the context of the military question, though?
Well, so I've had a lot of people that I've interviewed have said they have experiences in contact with extraterrestrials or non-terrestrials, and soon thereafter, U.S. military picks them up and subjects them to interrogation, sometimes painful, to find out what they learned from the ETs. And I don't know if you've encountered any stuff like that in your investigations.
Yeah, if I haven't personally encountered that myself, but if it was reported, if that was in the report that was sent to TESA, I would definitely investigate that through and through. I don't have Men in Black kind of type scenario. I haven't had anything come through our database to that extreme. But if anyone has any incidents, I'd like to hear about it through the reporting system, if we could.
Oh, okay. So there haven't been any reports through Canadian MUFON of that nature.
So I'm okay. So hold on. So TESA is separate from MUFON. I'm no longer with MUFON. I have experience with MUFON for 5 years, and then I left to start this Experiencer Support Association to focus on all things paranormal, so which includes UFOs, but UFOs was the one main focus of my study for the first 5 years. So now I'm focusing on everything, which is like cryptids. It could be a secret space program. It could be apparitions, Bigfoot. The idea here is to measure everything together and then correlate trends to understand the phenomenon as a whole, and to study more of the people versus the event, as to why are people experiencing this instead of someone else who's not, and what makes the experiencer the perfect candidate for for being subjected to these items, if that makes sense.
What did you find out? What is it that makes a person see the Virgin Mary and other people see an extraterrestrial being?
Exactly, because it's interpretation, right? So the way that we collect data, so we use, maybe just backtrack a little bit. Tessa has what's called the High Strangeness Paranormal Database. If you go to tessacan.org and you click the tab called the Reporting System, you'll be able to go through and make a report. It'll give you, once you get down to the type of report that you're making, you'll have a bunch of different types of events to choose from. So if it was abduction, or an apparition, or a shadow, or clairvoyance, or deja vu. So we essentially want to measure the type of event, and then after that, the subcategory question that's asked is the type of, or the thing that best correlates to what you saw. So, which would be the interpretation. So, for an example, if the event that you're reporting is an aerial phenomenon, which covers basically anything unusual in the sky, and your subcategory happens to be, you have a choice. I think I have to do this from memory. It'd be either military craft, orb, or extraterrestrial craft. Those are three opinionated categories. So what we would do is we would measure on the front end, say in a certain location, 10 people select area phenomenon as their event. And then we would break that down and say out of that 10 people, 5 people said it was military, 4 people said it was drone, and 1 person said it was ET. So then we would use that information to, I guess, correlate the interpretation. So once we look at the characteristics of so say right off the bat, the experiencer calls it a military craft or calls it a drone, it might share characteristics with the person who reported an extraterrestrial craft. So then say it was an unknown at some sense, and it becomes a known later on because we kind of remove the interpretation. And the one thing we could agree on is that all these objects were in the sky. So it's a hybrid study, but it's a complex yet intricate study.
Wow.
Do people tend to report military and drone encounters, or I mean, they go onto your site to report a military or drone, or are they saying that military is unusual, or I'm not sure.
It depends.
What
So
will be happening?
If they know it's a drone, chances are they're not going to report it because they know what it is.
Right.
But here's the thing too, is we need to understand what's normal to compare it to what's not normal. So if someone were to report as information a drone that they saw and the description, the height, and the characteristics within the report, to take their time to give us, a couple data points to measure as the variable, that would give us a constant that we could compare the unusual ones to, but there's a bunch of information online and data sets that I can easily pull up to compare once I get my data sets of what's unusual. So usually that what comes in are things that the individual experiencer cannot explain.
Right.
And the drone might be what's selected as their interpretation or their rationality on what they think it may be, and they're unsure, and that's their best guess. So in terms of sociology or understanding, I guess, the individual mindset, if the person thinks it's a drone, it more than likely is. But they don't understand enough about drones to accept that it is a drone. So then my job would be to try and validate if it is a drone, and then explain to them that it wasn't.
Okay, so,
and then
like an engineer would see something different than a shaman.
Well, of course, because an engineer may have designed the drone, or may know what to look for, right? So we all have different walks of life. We all have different experiences. Like, I'm a private investigator by trade, so like investigating and I'm active. I'm not retired. So like investigating anything for me is natural, right? So it's very easy for me to discern and decipher something within a matter of seconds or sometimes minutes, whereas some people might take a day to do a crossword puzzle. Like it's just, I guess it's just my certain strengths, right?
Right.
Problem with that is that everyone believes in a higher power, or majority of people believe in a higher power, and they want to believe that there's extraterrestrial life. And where we get this mismatch and confusion of all these things is different people trying to interpret what we cannot currently see or feel or present. So when you get a skeptical who's got all these credentials to say that it's not this and not that, but yet they've never studied UFOs or anything for a substantial amount of time, it becomes frustrating because that's also a one source and a one opinion. So the other concept with our data is to collect it in a uniform way that's unbiased, so that way we can distribute it to everyone, so that everyone can put their opinion on the same data set, and then based on that information we might be able to come to a conclusion of what it may or may not be, including the skeptical mind. Because
So the conclusion would be a social consensus rather than any measure beyond. That's what these people, the mean or median of what they're saying.
Right, and then we will get one step closer to actually understand if the phenomenon exists, because it's there's enough information to establish that society believes in the phenomenon, and the want that the phenomenon to exist. And there's lots of many reasons to believe that, and lots of many reasons to want that. But is it the truth? And there could be nothing. Really could be.
Right.
Could it go another step? Is if enough people believe it, then the human mind starts assembling the information it needs to create, say, interplanetary travel and things like that.
Exactly. And then who are we to tell them that if they believe it, to take that right away from them, right? It's then we might as well tell them what God to believe in or what food to eat, like it's a very sensitive thing. But for me and for Tessa, like, our interest is to find out what exactly is happening. And because the term paranormal simply just means above and beyond anything that's normal. It technically includes UFOs, because if we can't identify what the craft is, then it's technically paranormal. And I was a paranormal investigator before I was a UFO investigator, and then I did the UFO for 5 years and then left and did Britain. Now I'm starting the bridge. And I'm starting with my analytical approach. When I measure the experiencer, like the person who will tell me a story about an abduction, and or someone who believes in paranormal, they're having a paranormal experience, and they start telling me the events around a shadow figure. If I were to write down the characteristics of the events and not give a title to it, there's many similarities, such as, they're both being possibly taken, or they're visited, or they hear voices in their head, or they have these feelings and these sensations afterwards. So when you look at the symptoms or the effects of the event, they're similar and or almost identical. The problem that we're having is one person interprets it as paranormal, the other person interprets it as UFO or alien. Now, to go deeper into that, we have, when you go into conventions and stuff like that, and I think Janet and we talked about this in great detail on the last episode, was that the UFO community will not accept paranormal at all. They will not touch it because they're more nuts and bolts and scientifically oriented. Whereas at a paranormal convention, if anyone who speaks UFOs on the matter would be welcome with open arms. So there's a social stigma, there's a bias, a prejudice, within. It's an intricate web of issues, social issues. What's important is to try and weed through all that in a systematic way without passing judgment, without giving an identification, without knowing 100% certainty, and to measure in such a way that could provide a good sample for all the experts to weigh in on. But once our data set is sorry, go ahead.
Well, are the experiencers or contactees different than the general population in some significant ways? Have you found that?
Well, there's no way to know. It's data, right? So if anything, it would be I would be able to say currently with data that I have, because the survey's not complete yet for this year, so I don't have the full numbers. But I mean, the only thing I could say is that there is a high range of experiencers who have A plus blood, who claim to have been abducted or visited by shadow figures. So that's the
Wow,
stat. You know, sorry, go ahead.
that's
So
fascinating.
it's A positive blood, not the rhesus negative blood.
Well,
I mean, not
see, that's
the
the
O
point,
negative.
right?
Yeah.
I was glad you
Hmm.
because everyone reads O negative. Everyone, that's what everyone's been reading, but the people are reporting, and I'm seeing a high trend. So what are the real trends? What are the real numbers? Because there's theories upon theories upon theories, but what's the truth, right? So when the experiencer, and it's just the way that I have the system designed, because you don't know what I'm measuring, you're just answering the questions, and the questions are asked specifically, and plus I'm changing the questions as I continue to learn more information. So the data is growing, and it'll evolve and change every year. So yeah, so like I always believe to be the O blood, but now we have to assume that all those experiencers who did that sample are genuinely experiencers too. There could be bad samples in that too. So it's a whole mess of stuff. But I promise you, when I release the report, I'll have a good, thorough explanation on the data and what it means and how it needs to be interpreted. I've done it before for MUFON 2 years in a row. MUFON will not have a data set this year because I'm no longer with them, and they are not carrying that on.
So let me just suggest a hypothesis from my particular perspective.
Yeah,
I'm a Jungian. That is, I would imagine that people that have a larger identification with their spiritual subselves are more open to paranormal experience than those that are identified with their intellectual and logical subselves.
of course. Um, that's yeah, because like that's what like negative thoughts, positive thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you allow it to happen, then it'll happen. But what's actually happening? Is that just a way of thinking? Is it just a way of life? Is that karma? Is that the way the universe works? Like there's so many explanations for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm not focusing on finding out what it is. My focus is I guess when the experiencer reports, my mission isn't to debunk it. My mission is to find data or other evidence to support that what you're saying is possible. And then if it's possible, and then we get enough people reporting the same thing, then that theory becomes even more possible. And then we break down the theory to find out exactly what is happening. And in order to do that, we have to measure so many people
Yeah.
who are experiencing the same thing in so many different parts of the world.
Okay.
So, like,
Okay. My hypothesis
You're breaking up, honey. Slow down.
Cryptonesia. When
Say that
people
again.
hear
Say it again. Sasha, lost you. Just say that whole sentence again. Try it again.
okay, my hypothesis is that one possible explanation is cryptonesia, where people hear something or read something and forget the source and believe they become confluent with that information. They identify with it as though it happens to them, and it does happen to them experientially. And I just that's what I think could account for some of the data anyway.
and it definitely could. And then the next question is well, I guess it's up to the person too as to whether they accept that information to be true or not. So why would they believe that? And that is a variable, of their upbringing, their religion, the like the things they watch, the programming that they go through. There's so much.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a constant in every story. So like so again, to take this from the criminology point of view, so the private investigator, when an event occurs, even if it's not paranormal, like a break and enter, for an example, and there's multiple witnesses. You talk to multiple witnesses and you write down the things that can be traced, such as the clothing that is worn, or the description of the person, the sound of the voice, all things that cannot be manipulated. And when you talk to all the witnesses, you mark down all those same trends, and then you look at them later on and say, 4 out of the 5 witnesses said the guy is 6 feet tall, so maybe he is 6 feet tall. And then you take that analysis, and then you put out the wanted page, and then you go and you find your suspect, and then sure enough, that hypothesis turned out to be a reality. So that same criminology approach is what's being used for these witness statements. Is I want to know what you saw, what it looked like, when you saw it, what happened to you, so that way we can actually then take that data and then go out to, like, say for an example, out of 100 people that fill out a survey, say 80% of them was in a small town in Ontario. I would then give me enough data and enough confidence to spend my resources to go out to that small town in Ontario and start canvassing and surveying, investigating to find out and dig deeper. There's a lot of freelance paranormal investigating groups who just jump on the idea of something being haunted, or someone can't contain their Wi-Fi in their house, so they have a leak of of energy, and then they go and they run a mile when their K2 meter goes off. And that is one way of doing it, but that happens in every single home. And if I have a data set that kind of that narrows down that search and gives me a high probability of recreating those events, then we have a better chance of actually understanding what that phenomenon is. And once we're able to recreate the event and capture or document the activity, then we'll be able to measure it and try to debunk it then. And if we can't debunk it at that point, then it's considered inconclusive, and then we put that in a special box, and then we keep doing, and then we just repeat and repeat and repeat until we have enough evidence to make a logical suggestion or hypothesis.
Wow.
So, Ryan, do you think that people's belief comes into play? I'll give you an example. Last night I was watching Jimmy Kimmel, and he flew a New York psychic over to California, and Jimmy was there with Guillermo and his family, his cousins and people in the audience. Now, his one family member, female cousin, was a crystal lady that was, new age. And then, of course, Jimmy was a skeptic, and Guillermo was in the middle. But the psychic ended up getting her father and saying things that only she would know, proving it was her father, right? Kind of proving it. But the Jimmy Kimmel got nothing because he was total skeptic, and Guillermo was in. So it seemed like their beliefs played into what kind of information was the psychic was able to pull through into onto the show. So do you find that do you ask people, are you Catholic, or what's your belief structure? Does that play into the type of phenomenon they're getting?
One of the questions on there, it doesn't have anything to do with religion or faith. I've left that question out for now. I may measure it in 2020 when I update the survey. I have a couple other questions I want to ask, but I don't want to change the survey in the middle of a year, because then the data set will be all messed up. But
Right.
I don't. In order to measure this, I don't want to make any interpretations myself. So when I look again, what I'm looking for are the traceable data, that like the things, like there was somebody in the room, I was taken. Those are constants. The interpretation of who took them is totally, it could be anything. It could be a boogeyman, it could be a ghost, it could be an alien, it could be your neighbor, right? Like it could be a human being, it could be a government agent. What I need to do is figure out if that witness is actually telling me the truth, that they really believe that they were taken by something. And if they were taken, then it doesn't really matter what they believe in. because they believe that this event had happened, because skeptics could be taken too. It's I can measure 100 things, and it's just the less I measure, the easier it is for a data set. So you have to be less and specific, if that makes any sense. I feel if I measure or throw in religion at this time, I personally might be, I guess, sensitive to certain religions over others, because I don't want to, like, say for an example, someone identifies that they're Catholic, and I know within their religion that believing in ghosts or Christian or believing in ghosts would be kind of blasphemous or against their religion. So I don't want to be that person that's like, what kind of response would I be able to give back? It puts me in a difficult place, because I don't want to shift their belief system because of an opinion that I have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you could ask an open-ended question like, "Do you have what is your belief structure?"
Right. So that's what I'm saying. It's just it's the same thing as asking if they have any mental health condition. I don't want to. I want to assume that everyone believes in a higher power, and then everyone possibly could have a mental illness, because that's either what's happening. We're either collectively believing in a phenomenon, or we're collectively mentally ill, and there's no way to determine one way or the other. So I don't measure those items, because I won't ever make an opinion on it. I won't ever use that as an example, or I won't ever say, what you're seeing isn't true because you have a mental illness. I don't touch those things, because I can tell you, since I'm talking about mental illness right now, majority of my cases, I have learned that some people do suffer from some sort of mental illness, but that comes out later, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the investigation. But the skeptics and they will use that, and they will run a mile with it and say that the person's not credible because of the stigma. So religion and mental illness is a big no question for me to ask, because I do want to reproduce the data set, and I do want to protect the experiencers, and I don't want people to make an illegitimate judgment based on preconceived stereotypes that we have in this world.
Yes, I totally get it. George McGovern lost
I
his
also
election.
don't ask for dates. I don't.
Yeah.
I ask their sex, because I think, no, I don't even ask that. I think it's automatic when you sign up for the newsletter. But I mean, that stuff shouldn't matter, because at the end of the day, we all bleed. We're all humans, and then that's what matters, because there's people in different parts of the world seeing the same thing, right? So, and because I already believe that there's some sort of racism going on between paranormal and UFO, or prejudice,
Mm-hmm.
it would be kind of counterintuitive for me to ask judgmental questions as well. So
Right.
it's
Do you find that people, some people intentionally lie, like it's a joke to them, or they
yeah.
want to come in and skew up your database?
Well, my database is a smart database. It will ask you. So if I could, compare this to other databases that I've used, you can put anything you want in there, and if you don't want to put anything in it, it's okay. The report still gets submitted. Majority of my time with MUFON had spent contacting the witnesses to get additional information, so that way I could start the investigation. 9 times out of 10, I wouldn't get a response. I would have bad data, and I would have to close it because I couldn't do anything with it. But then MUFON would take the synopsis of it and believe it at face value, and then they'd write a book and sell it. So it's it's not a very good system. It's not designed properly. My reporting system, and I keep saying because I created it, but it's for ours. It's our reporting system. is smartly designed that you have to fill out every single question. So if you get along the way and you decide that there's a question that's not comfortable for you, you don't have to click submit. And if you don't click submit, excuse me, then your personal information isn't sent to me. So you're also held accountable. It gives you, it explains to you why the information is needed, and what we plan to do with that data. So it's also a legal contract, because you'll get a copy of that report. You'll actually get a statement from us as to why we need that information and what we're doing with it. There's a question about what you want us to do with the data, and then you get a copy of the report. So then if you get a copy of the same report, which has your response to what you want us to do, and then you're monitoring what we're doing with it, and if we break that, then you can pull up that report and say, hey, you're lying, and then I lose everything, including my company, because that's what's backing this right now. So I shouldn't have bad data, because in order to get someone to click submit, they would have had to read all of those, and they would have been forced to answer every single question, and it would, if they come to that far, then I would like to believe that they told me the truth, because if they were in there to mess around, they would have caught on to it real quick that they couldn't get away with it. So then they would deter them, and then they just wouldn't report altogether.
That's great. Glad you have it built in. I wanted to go back to earlier. You said that you did get some secret space program people. So you're saying you did get secret space program people, but no My Labs people. So thus far.
No, what people? Sorry.
My labs, the military labs. Sometimes there's an overlap, but I'm talking about that.
So
What Dr. Lessin was saying was.
So there is an overlap currently. So I cannot confirm if it's secret space program or My Labs, but I can confirm that there are a trend of individuals who share stories of being off-world and working with military personnel, and have no explanation on how they know certain things. So again, to call it secret space program would be an interpretation. To call it My Lab would be another interpretation. But our data set currently can show that multiple people have been part of some sort of military operation on this planet or some other planet that involves, I guess, interstellar or communication between other species. And to validate, so that's essentially all we can do, is confirm that these events are taking place. And if you interpret it as My Labs and someone else interprets it as the secret space program, then so be it. But at least the two worlds can agree upon that this experiencer is telling the truth, and then we can dive into it a little further.
What we're finding is some people, they have a regular abduction with an extraterrestrial, and then within like a day or two or three, the military comes in and abducts them and wants to understand what just happened with the extraterrestrial. They're trying to get information. What does the experiencer know, having just interacted with the extraterrestrials? And then the secret space program, these people find that they are sometimes on board a ship on another planet, on Mars, somewhere, and they're often engaged with fights, having like their soldiers are actually in the some kind of military, and they're fighting, spider people, reptilians, and sometimes some people find that they are reptilians. They get transported into an avatar, and the avatar is enhanced, and they might be a normal sized man in their human life, but they're in this super sized, rock'em sock'em robot type, enhanced muscles, and they're fighting battles. So that's two separate phenomena, and it could be male and female. It's not just men. So that's what I was just trying to differentiate between the two.
Yeah, when you break it down like that, I see how they are separate. With the data that I have, there is a transition between one to the other. So I don't have all my notes in front of me too, so I'm trying to be careful with what I say because I don't know which of these experiencers have allowed me to talk and which one hasn't. But it's all mixed up in my head here. But it would start with an alien presence, and then maybe followed up with a military presence, and then immediately after, dreams would start to happen in which these off-world battles seem to happen. But then it's the question of whether or not it's a dream or a memory or precog, future sight.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, once there's enough data that's collected and we've established that the witness does believe that something is happening, then there's a second element where we would provide them the referral to a few of our other experiencers on the team who are a mentorship and then also we have a hypnotherapist. Her name's Leslie Mitchell Clark. We would send them for regression, and I wouldn't tell her the details, just that this may be an experiencer. Here's my thought. Bring them back to this date, this time, and ask them what they see, and give me a report. And that's how we operate. And then she'll give me the audio file of that. She's very good at not asking any leading questions. She'll ask the question specifically from me, which is great. And then she sends me the audio file, and then I compare that to my notes. And then we usually wait about 3 to 4 months after I talk to them to give the witness, the experiencer, the benefit of the doubt that they may not be lying, or if they are lying, it gives them time to forget what they told me. And then if they bring them back, and they hit 80% of the same markings or same details, then it kind of proves a higher possibility that they're telling the truth, that they really believe it's happening. And we just repeat that over and over and over again until we have enough for me to write my book.
Mm-hmm. So one of the other things, speaking about testing memories, is that we find that some of these people have injected memories. Like one of our interviewees was a clone, and so they gave him a whole artificial childhood. He had no childhood. He was awakened when he was 27, right? So he had no childhood, but they gave him this whole fake upbringing, parents, and they said, we told your parents you died or whatever. And then at some point later, they confessed to this fellow, and they said, yeah, we just gave you all those memories. So we found that sometimes they put in false memories to confuse the experiencer, so I guess they're not revealing classified information. Have you encountered that?
Well, yes. And actually, at the Alien Cosmic Expo in Toronto, I spent some time with Captain Randy Kramer. I had a private lunch with him. We did. I spent some private time with him as well. I discussed some of these items, and I was really interviewing him to kind of understand, is the secret space program a thing, right? So as an individual, I do feel confident enough that he's either A, the real deal, or B, he's been telling the story long enough that he believes it to be true himself. So I don't see any signs of deception with this guy. He's very intelligent, and he seems to be able to explain a very what seems to be an impossible scenario in a logical way, to make it to explain it in such a way that it may be possible. And if it might be possible within what we understand today, then it could be possible. And that brings a whole different level of things. But I partook in a remote viewing session, which was a 4-hour private condensed session with Randy and a few other people. And as part as an investigator too, I'm trying to subject myself to all these people who claim to be what they are, and study them and what it is they claim to be experts of, and subject myself to these pseudosciences to I guess, grasp my own opinion for research purposes too, to understand. And in partaking in the, I guess, in the remote viewing exercise, I was able to, half-ass, but almost be able to conduct the ability to do it. We did an exercise where we had to visualize what was inside a purse that was hand selected, and I got two out of the three items that were there, and I know no one fed any information to me, so I believe the concept is possible, but I don't have any confirmation other than that prior to going into seeing Randy, that I had already had 5 or 6 cases reported to me. And hearing him for the first time, he said a lot of markers that resonated with the cases that I had. And there's a lot of markers, and this will be the first time I actually say this on radio too. There was a lot of similarity markers that he mentioned that resonated with me in terms of things that I've never divulged before myself. And I'm currently waiting to have another conversation with Randy to go in more depth to find if what the hell's going on with my things, because I definitely resonated with the guy, and it was weird because um, I can share personally in my opinions, in my experience, there are many times where I will pick up new habits that I know I've never done anything before, but I will do it as if I've done it 1,000 times before. And then there's just some strange things that are happening to me currently that I might be associating with that, but I can't confirm. And I'm not willing to go under regression because it's very important for my research that I stay in the dark. And I believe that I'm not an experiencer, because if I have any evidence that suggests that I'm an experiencer, then I might look at this information in a different way, and then I'll have to start all over again. There's enough belief with me that I want to believe, but I want to know. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, we find that often people get into this research and become an investigator, or write a book, or and they are experiencers, but it might be so deeply repressed in their subconscious that that they haven't quite accessed it. But it's the same thing. They want to remain objective, so they don't want to be an experiencer because they think that might be flaring their results in their research. Sasha, you've been quiet. What would you like to say? Sasha. Sasha, you there? Are you muted?
Just
Try, try again.
I'm here. Can you hear you? Can you hear? No, I'm not muted.
Okay,
Muted.
now we can hear you. Go ahead. Try it again.
In the other room.
No, don't. You'll get feedback. Just start again. We finally heard you. Go ahead.
Okay. This is what you're saying is fascinating. I have the same impression.
Your Skype is really swanky.
Yeah,
Okay,
he
we're
needs
probably
to
gonna have
call.
to.
Yeah, he needs to hang up and call back. He's just got a bad connection.
Sasha,
Sincere,
Sasha, 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 you have a bad connection.
story code in the internal information checks out, and what's happening though is there's a yes,
Sasha, we'll have to have you hang up. Sasha, we can't hear you. We'll have to have you hang up and call back in. Okay. back to you, Brian. I'm going to try to fix this.
Yep, no.
We didn't get your whole story about why you even got involved in this in the first place. So I'm going to fix the phone here and get Sasha on. I'll be right back. So keep talking, and a mad painter's here. So keep the conversation going. Let me go do a tech fix here. Okay, go ahead, you guys. I'll be back in 2 minutes.
What,
Ask the question.
you said you were writing a book. Is it primarily about contacts, or what is it exactly? Is it about the mindset of the people with contact, or they have been contacted, or?
I started writing it. I haven't wrote into it for some time, but it's going to be basically okay. So what I'm trying to do, because I don't have any credentials to write me off as a scientist or PhD or anything like that. So I do have an investigative background, and so it's going to be an investigative book around I guess my experience and my knowledge. But I am going to break down all of the, I guess, the phenomenons that we've been talking about, the sociology, the concept, the history of paranormal, the history of absolutely everything, from day one up to today, as well as the alien phenomenon, just break them all down to the core. The history of Bigfoot, the history of aliens, the history of UFOs, and then I'm going to highlight the characteristics that are under the paranormal umbrella. So the first part of the book is essentially identifying that the word paranormal is being not used properly, because today most people hear the paranormal word and they only think about ghosts. And if you break down the word to its core, it technically means anything that we do not understand. If you put your keys down and then they disappear, that's paranormal. If you don't know where they came from, like it's the word. And with today's sociology and upbringing and programming, it's everything's been is a mess today. So the first part is to bring it back to the way everything was originally intended. Once I'm able to bring you back to the intention, then we start talking about the parallels between aliens and shadow figures or ghosts and aliens. And then the third part of the book will be the data set, the information and the research that I've done and my team that's done that proves that theory to be possible or true. So in order for me to present, it's easy for me to say I believe that ghosts and aliens are connected, or if not part of the same, one before the other, or an effect of the other. And multiple people might say they believe it too. Everyone says, I believe it, I believe it, I believe it. But the intent of the book is to try and prove it, and the only way I can prove it is I got to start with the background, the history, the case law, as you will, evidence that it is possible, and then rewire the brain. Take the same information that we have today and just align it in a different order so that way you come to a different conclusion. And then present the new evidence under a new shaped mind, and then leave the reader with a different interpretation than what they had before. And all I'm going to be doing is presenting the same stuff that we've heard a million times before in a different way. So, as an example of how we could interpret things differently, is if you go to church, like a Catholic church or a Christian church, and I know this because before I started into this, I was actually considering being a priest myself. At age 15, I was really heavy into becoming a priest myself. But then I started studying the Bible, and then I had asked a lot of questions that didn't make sense, and the answers I didn't get didn't make any sense. And then what I ended up learning is through the training to become a priest, you're told to avoid certain passages and you're told to say certain passages, which means there's a narrative there that's controlled. Well, if you take the same book and you break it down and you read it word for word, there's a lot of aliens, there's a lot of UFOs, there's a lot of mystical and magic and paranormal stuff in that book. But they're not allowed to use it. They're not allowed to say it. And in the way that they deliver it with the system, with the entire religious system is designed to give out input in a certain systematic way, so that way the brain is wired that way. But if I were to take those events and change them or align them with another series of events from a different event to create a different picture, then you would interpret something else that you already know. You just didn't come to that conclusion. You know what I mean? It's like watching a movie drunk and then watching a movie sober.
I believe Sasha is back with us now.
Okay.
Yes. I'm hearing you off and on. Yeah. It's fascinating.
And I'm back as well.
Okay.
We're both here. Okay. So go ahead, Sasha. You want to try asking a question, because you've been left out of the loop for a while.
No, I understand what you're doing. I have no question except there's this distinction that Basiago and others make about, well, look at there's consensual evidence when you have a bunch of people saying the same thing, and that's enough to get you hung for murder in the United States. But it's not anything that people would consider evidentiary, even if many witnesses have seen a craft, and they've been, and several people say they've been aboard the same craft. They've been on the Mars, they've been on the moon, they've seen this and they've seen that. I saw you there, and oh yeah, we all talked together, and we all, the more we talked, the more we realized we had the same experience. Well, we call that pathological confluence, when people start losing their boundaries, and that's certainly something I would look at.
Yeah. So, and until we get confirmation of something, we're always gonna have that. So while I'm battling the data part on this end, it's called the Experiencer Support Association. So while I'm collecting this data to do this study, it's in order to provide support for other experiencers. So if we studied the trends of the phenomenon on a whole, we'll better understand the people involved, and we'll better understand the subject, so that we can better triage or cure or support the experiencer. That is, we don't necessarily need to prove anything to the government, or anything, or society. We just know. And as our following grows, that's our strength. Is validating and confirming and bringing everyone together under this revolution, or this association. That's why it's called an association, to bring everyone together. And then if we can, instead of, and again, as I was just talking with Thomas there earlier, about rewiring the brain, instead of waiting for confirmation, just believe that it's there, and then let's start having the discussion about how to deal with it, how to cope with it, how to live with it. And then as because there are some people that are afraid to say something, and that's what we want, is to create that safe haven, that support feeling, so that way people can just talk about it and be credible, and not be afraid to lose everything they got. And me as an investigator too, I also have a legal firm in my company as well. So like we're really well protected, in the sense of when we put data out there, it's going to be reinforced and with a fine-tooth comb before it goes public. But at the same time, we're ready to defend the reputation of any experiencer who were to come forward and say that we've given them a certificate that says that we think they're an experiencer. So there's some sort of insurance there to protect the conversation, and the goal there is to encourage people to talk about it. Because if I use like MUFON for an example, that is an organization that has apparently 500 volunteers, but no one's ever heard of them. They only hear about Jan Harzan, and then and that's it. And
Right.
if a volunteer drops the bomb, or like me for an example, I worked with them for 5 years. No one ever heard about me until I started promoting myself. And if I didn't, the old saying, if you don't promote yourself, nobody will. And it wasn't until I started getting, I guess, more attention than they were, that they started trying to snuff me out. But that's a different story. But anyways, with me and Tessa, I lay everything on the line. You know who I am. You know where I live. For if you look close enough, you know what I do for a living. You have the tools and the resources to destroy my reputation, and my company. And when I'm on a show here telling you that I believe that there is a phenomenon happening, and I'm trying to create a team to support those who are credible people experiencing this phenomenon, and at the same time trying to understand what it really is in a world where we could be manipulated or brainwashed or programmed, because they're all possibilities, because I want to know the truth. So I think I might have got off track a little bit there, but
I think you're on.
No.
No, I think the central problem is that people have vested interest in maintaining whatever their position is, and you're going after information which is raw and not forced into this frightened thing of don't push people to fess up, because the government has a lot more information. Can you imagine how much things would be cleared up if we had much more information?
Well, of
That
course.
the military, of course, has, and they actually could do much to clear up the confusion.
But they could. But you gotta. So now you gotta ask the question why. Okay. So let's if we could. Let me just talk about this for a second here. So
Because they're defending the United States and Canada. That's why.
But okay. So here's the thing: the government is lying, or they're not lying.
Yes, they're lying.
Right. So of course they're lying.
Yes,
but now we need to ask why. Right. The question is, why are they lying? Right. So then again, we're getting into interpretation as to why they're lying. We don't know why they're lying, but there may be a reason why they're lying. So if you let's believe, so this is what we know. Just say we know, for example, that there are alien species, there are a secret government program, all these things are happening. Some people are willing to accept it, some people are not. And when you when you confirm something like that, when you have a population of so many people, it is a huge variable when a small percentage of those people are the ones who accept it, and the larger percentage are those who might not accept it and might go into panic or fear or rejection or anarchy. So in terms of numbers, it would make sense. It totally makes sense that if they're oppressing it or they're hiding it for a reason to protect against that type of epidemic or event from happening. Now, I do believe that myself, as well as other people, including you guys, the fact that we're able to have these conversations because they're listening to it, they're listening to what we're saying, and the fact that it's allowed may be part of the slow conditioning to to allow people to accept and to understand that this is happening and then this is real, so that way when the event actually happens, the likelihood of so many people panicking will be less, because like there's so many people that might just jump off bridges. They might kill themselves. They might destroy the government. They might lose all their power. There's so much
But
consequence that.
it's not just that people will panic. It's that these people in charge have murdered and kidnapped people
Well,
and
they're not
broken
going to
international law.
They're not going to admit to everything. They will admit to something, but they will never admit to everything. And but the thing is once they admit to something, then you can believe that everything else is true. It's because they haven't admitted to anything that this is either not true or it is true. And why we don't need to know if they're lying to know that they're lying. Like, I don't need to hear that they're lying to know that they're lying. So they're not going to tell us, and I accept that, and I understand the reasons for it. And those who are fighting for disclosure, it's good, but it's a wasted effort, because what I'm focusing on is what happens after. Once they confirm, the world is going to panic. And Tessa, when we make our detachments, the whole idea is to be that resource center for those who believe that what they were experiencing was a dream, all of a sudden becomes reality. And then they're afraid to talk to the police because they don't want to be locked up. They're afraid to talk to the government because they don't want to be subjects. They're afraid to talk to their doctors because they don't want to be prescribed or diagnosed with schizophrenia. So the goal here is to
So
provide.
you're convinced that there's going to be a panic event once disclosure happens instead of. See, I think that I have a different perspective.
Well,
I've
I'm
been
not
part of this
convinced.
for
I'm not saying
65 years. Yeah.
the entire world isn't going to panic, but some will. And from a resource point of view, I would like to have an option for someone who does panic to be able to turn to and get the support that they need. Because currently there is no one there's not that many people to turn to on a professional level, right? You can get opinions from your neighbors, but you can't talk about seeing ghosts to your doctor without being locked up.
Well, I
So
was on a panel with Randy last year in October. I had a
yeah,
conference in New Mexico, and we talked about this phenomenon. And he was putting out statistics about what percentage of people they think will panic, and I think it was relatively low because they've been conditioning us since, you know, Roswell
yeah,
and the day the Earth stood still and all these different things for the last 50, 100 years to
yeah,
be open and receptive. They were talking about doing the false flag event where they will have the fake alien invasion or the
yeah.
fake
He,
alien
he said
sighting, and then
4 months. In
pardon?
June, in September, he said that invasion is going to happen within 18 to 24 months.
Right. And then we talked about the false flag Jesus. They were going to have the second coming of Jesus correlate with the UFOs, because I had talked to Stuart Squaregood about that. And he revealed, well, he said he doesn't know what's going on lately, but he was part of the this planning of this false flag when he was involved in Montauk in the early years. So they've been talking about this for 40, 50 years now, how to do this, how to reveal this to humanity. But if it wasn't, I mean, I would invite you to contact Randy and revisit the conversation. At least when he was on my panel, and unfortunately that panel did not get recorded. But he said that it wasn't going to be
Yeah,
that many people, and we can adjust pretty rapidly right now because aliens are everywhere. They're in our
that's the
commercials, right?
survey and that's the stats, right? And it's a hypothesis. And what I'm suggesting right now is also a hypothesis based on my study and my knowledge and all that stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
But the real test is when it happens. So from we won't really know until it happens, and it needs to happen so that
Right.
we know. And I guess with my perception of how I see the world going these days, I feel like us creating that support group for them now is being proactive, because I can really see that I really feel like this is going to be happening relatively soon, within the next year or 2 years. And I just, we're really close. We're really close.
I would hope so.
And some of my closest friends and closest family have experiences, and the thought of them not having anyone to turn to, it's upsetting, because we need to support them. Or what if the entire world is affected? What if this is a global phenomenon? Then what?
Well, I think one of the most effective ways we can do this is public awareness, and we can start to create awareness on like YouTubes. Just start. I don't know, maybe recording some encounter groups, people coming forth. I'm an experiencer.
Episodes like this is part of it. Every show you have, a different person is part of it. What you're doing is part of it. What I'm doing is part of it. What anyone is doing to have conversation and listening and talking about it, you guys, to everyone, like, you guys are part of that disclosure movement. Like, I don't think we need to fight for that yes, or like that confession. We're not gonna get it. But I think what they want is more people receptive to it, so that way they can divulge it in their own format, so that way it happens. You know what? They might even just sneak one of them out, and then they would be like, totally. I wouldn't be surprised if they say, "Oh, this is the first time we've encountered them," right? Like, just get it out there, however they want. Just it needs to happen. But then, is it benevolent or malevolent? Is it good or is it bad? Like, there's.
What do you think? What's your conclusion?
It doesn't matter. The second it happens, I'm prepared for whatever happens. But what I believe is that the amount of time and effort that has gone into covering it up, only to have it drip and leak so much to control the narrative that the government is protecting us, or there is a bigger plan for us that they need us to comply with. Because just like you need to vote in a president of the United States, sometimes you're happy with who you got, sometimes you're not, or sometimes you're happy with what you voted in, and then turns out it's not what you were happy for. Or looking for. But with the constant that's there is every single person needs to vote. So if the government loses the vote, which means loses us, then they lose control. So if this alien race is part of, or the next chief and commander for us to follow and listen to, I think all this conditioning is so that way we're receptive to it, and so we don't combat it. Because they may, we put all the theories in together. What if they do possess technology that could destroy the world? That includes the superpowers of the world die too. It's.
Well, don't you think that they would already have done that?
Well, it depends on the end game.
I mean, they apparently do have the ability. Go ahead.
But what the end game would determine all the purpose of it. Are we part of the end game, or are we just a placeholder? Is the planet the end game because of the resources? Like Sumerian, you go back to like ancient Sumerians, when the Anunnaki had came down and they settled for the first time, and then the deluge happened, the flood, right? And then they went up and they reserved for that time, and then when they came down is when they divided. They had to divide so they could make up for lost time, and then that tradition carried and carried and carried and carried to today, which is why we have borders and countries. Otherwise, we'd still be one world. and that was just to make up for lost time. So what exactly is it that they needed us for? Well, we were designed to be a slave race intentionally. Our value wasn't seen until later. I'm paraphrasing because I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with the Sumerian
Yeah,
background,
we've
right?
written 5 books,
Yeah.
so we know.
Yes. So
But it's interesting to hear interpretation. But go ahead, it's fun. Yeah,
I'm speeding through a long history of information, but they.
yes,
So the only conclusion I can come back to is that that is that same race that is coming back, because at a time when they first started it, the population was small, and since then we've multiplied drastically. And if they were to come back, if they were to return, and they were to want us to pick up where they left off, then they need us to comply. We are slaves. We all work. We work for money. Money pays for what? Pays for war. Pays for protection. Pays for what? So there's so many things happening. So the fact that they have control of us for so many things means that we as people are important to the end game, to the master plan. We just don't know what that plan is. So if we're important, then that means we have a say. That means we have a choice. And there are rules and regulations that we have to follow, otherwise we get locked up in jail. But there are ways to survive in this world without following, the beaten path. And it's because of that theory or that belief that we are important that makes me believe that we are not in danger. And that there may be a possibility of an alien race that exists here already, and that the real threat is an alien race that is coming. And in order to defend that alien race, they have to, I guess it would be better to introduce us to ours before we see theirs. Because if our first impression of an alien is a hostile alien, everyone's lost their ground for aliens. But if our introduction is a friendly one, then we would be more receptive to help the friendly ones to combat the hostile ones. Does that make sense?
I'm listening. I have I guess a different. Well, first of all, I'm a contact the experiencer my entire life, so I've been to many different council meetings, and I've been interacted with many different extraterrestrial species. And my dominant experience is that there's a lot of intelligence in the universe, and it is kind and conscious and loving, and that this is a rarity to have a violent species rather than a normal thing. And so, this polarity exists there where we have dark things that happen, and it appears that the third dimensional physicality here on Earth is where this passion play is playing out its final scenario. But I think in the end, we're going to go back to, unity consciousness and oneness, and that doesn't mean we lose ourselves. We still maintain our individuality.
Maybe
Mm-hmm.
the supreme race passed it off to humans, and then we as a society screwed it up so bad that they're coming back to take, to start it over again, to clean up the mess, because that'd be the same if you look at it as a company or a rank and file. You pass it down, and then if somebody doesn't follow your example the way that you had left it for them, then the only way to bring it back is to come back and realign everything. So if the race was originally intended to be peace, love, and harmony, and passion, and all that stuff, which is great, but today's society, there's not much of that today anymore. So Randy was saying that this event they were going to stage within 18 to 24 months an alien invasion, and the reason why they were considering it is because for that minute or that moment where they see a common enemy, we will no longer be fighting with each other. We won't be fighting with our neighbors. We won't be fighting with our borders, because we'll have to work together to protect the common earth. And then at that point, we realize that, hey, we don't need to fight anymore. We need to work together. And that event is actually going to bring everyone together.
Right, and that's
So
what Reagan said. Reagan kept saying that he was revealing it, and that's why they gave him Alzheimer's, because he kept saying it, and it's like they couldn't shut him up, so
yeah,
they just gave
a
him
lot of people
Alzheimer's
try to
because
say
he
it's,
was revealing the plan.
well, JFK tried to say it's, everyone's, it's all there, but this is a different time. I think it's gotten to the
Right.
point, like, if you can let's imagine that that the government is working with aliens and the aliens are in charge. Let's just, like, if you understand any business, it's the same philosophy. The aliens are like, well, you better get a hold of this world, or we're going to take it back from you. There might be
Yeah,
some
I
favoritism.
think that they never gave up charge. This is like a big experiment that's working out, and they're
Yeah, and it's
we're their children, and they want us to become conscious.
of
Pardon?
course, right? Well, how easy would it be for the boss to sit back and let it run its course, right? It's good,
Hmm.
but needs to be when the course has been derailed, who's going to set it back? And if we're not capable as a society of that's why confirmation would be good too. They just need to. It's just a big can of worms, a big can
Yeah.
of worms. But
Tosh, what do you think? Speak up,
Yeah.
Tasha. You've been so quiet.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Yes. Indeed. What Enki, the chief geneticist who created, he adapted the genome of the Nibiruans to Earth, and what he saw was that Nibiru was doomed. That eventually they destroyed their atmosphere by thermonuclear war. They were traveling in areas where they were exposed to intense radiation. People were going feral, and so he has written, and Enki, who never left, actually told Neil Freer and others. Uh, Basically, it's someday Nibiruans who are going to have to leave their planet and migrate. They want to come to Earth, and they want it to be a peaceful civilization where they could live and not get killed on the spot. And a lot of them have never left. Many of them keep interbreeding with us. And even the difficult times that we're passing through, even the challenges right now, they see as having been necessary to stimulate us to a singularity where we can use our computers to have the best outcomes for everybody. And basically, some have returned, according to our informants. They're here. Many never left. And what happened was most after the nuking of Sodom and Gomorrah, and that was actually the south end of the Salt Sea, which became the Dead Sea, and the Sinai Peninsula. A windstorm of radioactivity covered all of Iraq and wiped out Sumer and left Marduk, who had fallout shelters, and it was in the north end of Iraq, in charge. And Marduk basically took over, and all the competing nations and religions, and pitted them against each other, but run them all from the top through his hybrid surrogates. And of course, Nanar came back as Allah and tried to stop him. But recently, the Federation, according to our informants, has said, knock it off. It's time for us to help you attain a planet of peace, and it's certainly within your means. And the reality is, they need us as much as we need them. And anything that we've seen, and actually, it isn't that we're the bad seed and they had the good thing there. What happened here is just what happened there. They were murderous. They killed their own relatives to who could see who's on top. They were hierarchical. Women are always crushed under men in their society. They had wars. Once they had the slaves, they ran each other's slaves against each other. And there were people here way before the Anunnaki. They arrived 450,000 years ago. We know there's been waves and waves of settlement and ice ages where population has died back and then come back again. The Anunnaki were latecomers. There were people already here. That's my sort of summary of what things look like to me.
Well, that's pretty close too. Like I mean, like I can see that makes sense in terms of operations, right? Like so, like with the way that things have gone and the way that things are going, I mean, in integration, it would, maybe what's happening is they're prepping it. They're prepping it for the return for the ones that didn't stay, and that would make sense because if we have the ability to take them out, then they're going to defeat their own, or maybe they're afraid to come because they know what we're going to do, right? So how do you solve that?
What Kramer says is that that the president has started a group of Marines who said it's your job to bring this information out, and we authorize you to break silence and speak for the U.S. Marine Corps. That's what Randy says.
Yeah, I know it's part of the psionics division, and like I said, I sat with him and I met with him. I gave him, got real with him. I talked to him as a person, and I don't see any. I don't have any feelings of deception. But being in the investigator hat there, being in the background that I have, he could be trained to sell the narrative, but I mean he's doing a good job explaining it logically. So even if he is making it up, he's very smart in the terms of explaining it in a way that everyone will come to the conclusion without him actually saying anything. So he's using logic to explain a real life phenomenon, and at that point you have to believe him whether you doubt him or not, because it makes sense.
My take exactly. Right on.
Yeah. Somehow, Janet, I accidentally hit the mute button on yours because I tried to clear a notification. I'm trying to hit unmute on the microphone, but it's not working. So I don't know if she can hear me.
Janet, are you there, baby? I'm going to go in and rattle her cage.
Okay.
Talk to Ahmad for a minute.
Okay. There. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, I hit
somehow
mute accidentally trying to clear a notification. I just couldn't get it back on.
So I'm
Okay,
here. Okay. So my whole thought is I think we had Richard Allen Miller. We're talking about we're making this all up. Let's just say we are making all this up. We're making up this entire reality. This is a matrix, and this is a group co-creation. We created this to come down into form and have experiences and have something to do and challenges and lessons and ways to grow, evolve, become conscious, and we keep coming back in and having experiences and cycling back out, and we might be other species. Sometimes we're humans, sometimes we're Anunnaki, sometimes we're greys and we're reptiles, and so that's what his theory is. It's like we're making this all up. So when we get bogged down in this whole analyzing, like, is this real or is this fact? Is this fiction? Is it made up? Is it? What if we're making it all up? That's another way of looking at it. So then we're empowered. Like, what do we want to co-create? Where do we want this to go? I think to a degree we are making it up. That's why people want us to focus on reality. A lot of people perceive Jesus as the way and the light and the truth of the entire world, and other people think it's a Jesus myth and it's a story, and so they might be Muslim and theirs is the truth, or they might be Jewish and theirs is the truth. Mm-hmm. It's all interpretive, right?
And then we come back to study. The reason why I'm trying to break it down is so that way we can find out or at least agree on what's true. There is a higher power, yes or no? Okay, there is. Now, is it a male or female? Well, we don't know that. Is it, what's its name? We don't know that, but it doesn't matter. What matters is there is something. So now we need to act accordingly because there is something. And then, all we could be lying, we could be making it up, we could be falsely interpreting, we could be adding a few opinions in there, sneaking them in, and passing them off because you talk to somebody else. There's a whole bunch of
Well, yeah,
what
what we're saying is that that hierarchy is built into your way of thinking when you say there's a higher power. When you can, if you're just going to be dispassionate about it, you can say there's systematic interrelations among all variables in an existential field, and so the idea that there's some superior or higher, that's got that Anunnaki thought of everything being organized uh, in some parts that are worth more than others. When I think there's a lot of evidence that S below, and so above, and as here, so there, and as outside, so inside.
right, as above, so below. Yeah, no, for sure. And it is, even as we have this conversation, interpretation. I really wish that I could agree on one theory, but I can't. I believe it all to be true, and I believe it all to be fake, or all to be bogus. And, but I am very passionate, and having people report to me in a systematic way, so that way I can study and I can look at the narrative, I can look at the trends and then possibly learn something, or at least debunk some of the things. I'm not going to be able to get an answer for everything, but if I can help, provide a direction away from the conditioning or the programming that may be misdirecting us deliberately, then it'll we can focus our attention on what we do know, based on a higher probability. But then again, I'm just a guy in a small town in Ontario. I'm doing a study with about 800 followers. Like I'm small game. Talking about a very big game, and the hardest challenge that I'm gonna have is getting the attention out there viral. And unfortunately, the only way to get a viral attention is data. So that's why I have the data, and then I'll give it to people like Dolan who are interested in data, because Richard Dolan will talk about me because he likes data. And then with that data trend comes the experiencer support, and then I'm hoping that gets translated to, okay, this guy does good data, but that's not what he's about. He's about the bedside manner and taking care of the experiencer and making sure that we understand what's happening to us, and the resources are provided as we continue to evolve as a human species. Because if they're not going to explain to us what's happening, somebody needs to pay attention to what's happening and measure systematically in such a way to allow it to grow in safe conditions. And because this is a study that's never really been done this way before, there's a lot of unknown variables. But give me a year or two, and then I'll write a book about it, and then who knows, it could be accepted. Who knows? You need the data, though.
Right. Well, and that's very, very interesting, and I applaud what you're doing. I've looked at this for years, and I think that what you're coming to is creating some kind of consensus reality. If we're all making this up, or however it's coming down, but at least finding something that works for all. Right now we're in this, oh no, the world's going to die soon, we're going to destroy all the planet, and yada yada yada. and it's not working. It's like a broken system. It's not working for very many, just the people at the top. And we have this story, the Illuminati or the Anunnaki or the Dracos, and all these stories are playing out because we're focusing on them and making them more real. But I'm looking for something where we have a win for all and some joyful, happy endings to this scenario. And I think the more we can get people to wrap their heads around, it's not all doom and gloom and bad things and people, aliens hurting us or whatever, but there's something where we can come together and enjoy exploring space. And I think that's what Roddenberry had in mind. I started out
Right.
as a 12-year-old in 1966 with Gene Roddenberry, and he took us on a journey of the possibilities where we travel into space and we fall in love and we mix and marry outside of our species, and somehow we make children and everybody loves each other. And so I'd like to see us all return to love. I know Star Trek quickly became by the 70s Star Wars, that got hijacked. But the original was the Trek and the exploration and going out and exploring and encountering intelligence. That's why it was so wonderful that we had Spock, who was our first intelligent extraterrestrial, who ended up being, second in command of the Enterprise. And so I hold to that, and I encourage people to come around to, maybe we won't have any of this stuff, any of these scenarios where we're going to fight aliens, but we're actually going to. I think they did a Star Trek movie where the Vulcans came down and they were greeted when they first did warp drive, and I think we now have the M drive. So we do have the M drive in the secret space program, and Dan Cooper is working on a patent for the M drive, for M drive technology. There already is M drive out there. So we're getting this technology, which does take us to the stars, even outside of our solar system, like the Enterprise. So that's the picture I'm painting. And that's what I encounter when I have my extraterrestrial encounters. I don't have negative encounters. I'm welcomed.
And
I'm seen as an
and then
equal, as a peer.
those are good thoughts to have too, because there's a lot of positives, and I am positive too. Like what I hope for goodness too, but the reality is what happens. Like now we're talking about social classes too. The expense to get on a rocket ship to go out to space, is very high. When we talk about the possibility of colonizing Mars, because the fear-mongering concept of this planet not surviving for many more years, there's a camp that I side on for being underprivileged, in the sense that I can't afford a ticket to Mars, which means I'm either going to die on this rock or I'm going to be stuck here with everybody else. And what I'm trying to focus on is to create that peace and harmony here on Earth. Well, I feel that a lot of people are imagining peace and harmony out in space because it's easy to distance yourself.
That's
Sorry?
not what I'm encountering. That's not what I'm encountering. That's not what I'm. No, it'll be like the Berlin Wall coming down, and overnight technology. It's not going to be rocketry. It's going to be free energy systems. It's not going to be. You might even just teleport. Yeah. It's not going to be. What's his name? Elon Musk. Elon Musk is going to. He's going to be obsolete before he gets off the ground. It's other technologies which will take us. We are like in the dark ages right now, but overnight we'll go into an interstellar class, and that's what disclosure is about.
I want that to happen too. I believe that to happen, but what if it doesn't? That's what I'm saying, right? So
I'm just saying it's on the menu. It's on the menu. It's not. Elon Musk is not the whole menu. The menu involves Star Trekian technologies of clean, green, free, and we can join the Federation or whatever. We can, the average person can go and go in a sleep machine and gain all the knowledge in one night on how to do a job where he's an engineer on a starship, So
Yeah.
that's the technologies that I'm talking about with people that are in these programs that they're bringing back into this 3D reality that we can if we can wrap our heads around it, we can make it happen. So I'm inviting people to wrap your head around things that are way outside the box, because that's the stories I'm getting from a lot of experiencers. And we're not going to have to go through the hundreds and thousands of years. What if tomorrow you live to be 100,000 years or 1,000 years or 500 years, right? Those technologies exist to bust this current paradigm that we're in. Just like some of the Star Trek episodes, they went back and past and they got a girl from the 60s or something. She ended up being on the ship. They had to take her to the future. Well, there she was all of a sudden in this technology that was way beyond, the 60s, and they didn't even have cell phones, right? So, but she was very adaptable. And before you know it, she's, catching up and excelling. And I think that's our capability, because if we can think of it, if we can imagine it, we can make it happen. And I'm inviting everybody to expand your imagination beyond this negative scenario that we're all going to die. We're going to have some kind of Ronald Reagan space force, alien invasion. So we unify. We can unify without an alien invasion. We can just remember
What?
our loving oneness and wrap our heads around that.
And if we have a lot of it's energy, right? A negative thought is negative energy. Positive thought is positive energy. I know a lot of the stuff I'm saying tonight seems more on the negative side of things, but that just comes from a fear because of the unknown. I wish I had the belief as strong as you, but you're an experiencer. I'm not, that I know of, right? If I had an experience,
Right.
that probably would make it easier for me to accept these. But because I haven't experienced anything, the only thing I really have experienced is that there are a lot of people who see things that I cannot explain, and they're being made fun of, or they're being sheltered, or they don't have support. So, and I see that as cruelty in the world. I do see. I just I guess the fact, I guess in my own way, what I'm acknowledging is that the world today is not as good as it could be, and I don't foresee, with my experiences, that future sight that you have right now, with that positive, that's from your experience and what you know and what you've learned. And I wish I shared that. But with the things I've experienced, again, this is interpretation, that light at the end of the tunnel may not be as quick as I'd like it to be. And because a part of me feels like it's not going to be there anytime soon, the idea with Tessa is to be that beacon, to be that light, because I don't see it. I don't think that we have one, but I acknowledge that we need one. So maybe you and I, and we just got to work more together. Maybe we should,
Right.
migrate thoughts. And, I got the drive, I got the data, I got the research, you got the love and the passion. Let's maybe we just need to integrate and work together to grow simultaneously.
Yeah, and there's several experiencers that I've talked to that really have been to the same perspective, where things are really, super cool. And what's the honey? What's the name of the blonde-haired Canadian lady we met at the Alien Cosmos Expo a few years back? What was her name? We see her all the time at conferences.
Grishama.
No, not her, but no, not her. The other one, the young one. Oh, I'll have to look on my website. Anyway, we met a couple of them at your conference, the one in Canada, the Alien Cosmic, and they were their stories were just so inspiring. I'll look up their names and I'm drawing a blank right now, and I don't want to navigate away from this conversation, but so I'm not the only one that's having these highly positive experiences that are just amazing. But I'll connect you with those, and maybe you can have a conversation that'll help you get inspired because there's
Well,
a lot of dark ones, but they seem
inspired.
to with that.
I am inspired. It's just for me as an
Excellent.
individual. Maybe it's a problem with me. Like I am data oriented, but because I'm laying a lot of I'm putting a lot on the line in terms of credibility and resources when I
Mm-hmm.
make claims, and I would love more than anything to scream from the rooftops and say, all these things are real, but I still have to reserve a little bit of investigative, um, back and forth because of my credibility. Because like clients of mine could be listening to me as well, right? Like it's tough. I can't be
Uh-huh. I understand.
completely. But what's important is we'll come back to the survey. Is that I do ask a question on interpretation about whether you believe it to be a positive or negative experience. And I am
Mm-hmm.
seeing a trend that majority of the people that report are seeing it as positive. They're interpreting it as positive, which will support what you're saying to me today too. Is I know just because I feel like that doesn't mean that I'm not blind to the possibility that others are seeing it. And what I'm happy to hear and I'm happy to measure is that more people see it as positive than those who see it as negative. So, and that is part of it too. Like if majority sees it as positive,
Mm-hmm.
then that means that majority can help the negative when it happens. And same thing with me. I know for a fact that if I have an experience, my negative thoughts will be gone in an instant. But until that happens, I have a lot to think about. I have a lot to protect. I have a lot of people who I need to be cautious and protect because there's I cannot guarantee at this time that there's one or the other. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So
So
you're saying you haven't had any paranormal experiences yourself?
nothing that I could confirm, but
That's interesting.
I am a human being, I feel energy like anything else because we're energetic beings. I feel the microwave when the microwave is on, like there's natural explanations
Mm-hmm.
to these things. But I have not had a what the F moment or what was something
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't explain myself. But that's because I know how to investigate and I know how to dig deep enough to get the answers, but other people don't. I suppose if I didn't care about the investigation as much, I might be able to pass some of these off and just believe it to be, an experience. See, maybe I just have a lack of experience of belief too. I don't know.
Well, what we find is a lot of people when they want to invite contact, it sometimes take a while, but especially before you go to sleep, if you
Well, I do
invite
subject myself
contact, but
to
only positive.
these advice. I do meditate when I have the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. I've done the CE5. I partook in
Mm-hmm.
the remote Randy. Like I'm not avoiding these opportunities. I'm throwing
Oh, that's
myself
good.
into these environments. I'm partnering up with other paranormal investigators and going around, but like I'm not seeing anything. I'm not feeling anything. So either it's not happening, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's something internally that's not allowing me to accept it, or uh, this it's my I'm supposed to not feel anything because that's my drive into this investigation is because I don't have any. I'm able to look at it untainted or untainted is a bad word to use, but unaffected. I'm able to look at
Mm-hmm.
this with an open mind, without any bias one way or the other, right?
Right. Right.
Or
Well,
a
it's all
tiny little
perfect
different.
on some level.
Like the quote X Files here, I want to believe.
Yes.
I do, but everything. I don't know.
Well, it's all
Just and
perfect.
then
You can
Uh,
maintain. You can be the Mulder. Go
and
ahead,
it's
Sasha.
also
What were you going to say?
Ryan, listen,
yeah.
it's really important what you're doing. You're strategizing. You're considering how to present this material in a way that's effective, and get what you're doing. And I think it's a very intelligent behavior. I really get that. I want to thank you for that. I understand what you're doing. And I also want to tell you a little story about the panic and about what it really was. Colonel Ware, who has contacts with the CIA and is able to see all their documents, said that Roosevelt had talked with some of the Anunnaki, the tall grays, and he thought he had a deal, and he was excited, and he told his cabinet, "We have to tell the public this is wonderful. We're going to really get some assistance that's going to just benefit humanity." And the Joint Chiefs and everybody said, "Now wait a minute. Let's you might cause a panic." And what they went and did, according to Colonel Ware, is they got Orson Welles to broadcast H.G. Wells' story, and maximally caused a panic by the way it was presented, very, very dramatically, and that's when Roosevelt started MJ-12, because he said, "My gosh, we can't let that happen." But I can say that we can survive surprises. We survived Hitler. We survived the Twin Towers false flag, and we're probably going to survive Trump. I think we can survive learning about the truth about the extraterrestrial.
Yeah. You guys definitely have it tough. Hey, we got a problem with our guy too, but like we don't have control over that, so we have to survive. I like that concept. We will survive. We will persevere. It's there's a bigger mission. There's a collective. There's still a lot of people out there. Actually, you know what? I'll say this. Even though I haven't had an experience, I know that I'm awake. I'm aware. I'm aware of the phenomenon. I can see the phenomenon. I can see it happening and how it affects people. So that is an experience in some sense. It's just not the same experience that everyone else is having. And there are still a lot of people who are still closed, or still asleep. And, as torturous as it is for me to not see something cool and neat, which everyone shares all these loving stories, and I'm like, wow, I don't see any of that. But I do know that I am on the spectrum. I am on that path to enlightenment. I feel that. I do feel like this Tessa had come to me. The idea of Tessa had come to me in a dream. Some might interpret that as a download. That could be an experience. It could be, and I'd be willing to accept
Tell us
that
about
as
your
my.
dream. Tell us
Well,
about your dream.
I got a map, and it was in a dream. It's very intricate. I'd have to send you a picture of it, and then we probably would have to have a whole 2-hour episode of me deciphering this map. But it's actually ironically in the same place that I am today. I'm actually in a place called Kinmount, Ontario. I'm not at home right now, but it was in this very place, away from work and stress, that I was able to relax, where this information just started coming in. And it was during my questioning of whether I should stay loyal to MUFON or leave, because I did not appreciate the fact that MUFON didn't care about the experiencers. They cared about the data and how much money it made. So there was already a moral judgment that was weighing on me, as a person, that this large amount of people believe in this organization, but they're misinformed. I've always had a protest, rebellion type behavior as I was growing up. But in my dream, well, those are the current thoughts. And then, but within my dream, I kept seeing this design, this pattern, a triangular pattern with the circles and familiar shapes. It's really hard to, I don't even know how I can explain it. You have to see it. And I kept seeing it in my mind, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then I'm not an artist. I'm not even, well, I am an artist, but I can only draw digitally. And I carried this thought for 2 days. It was bugging me. It was driving me like crazy. Then I finally sit down on my computer at home, open up Photoshop, and then I put on some classical music, and I just said, okay, I'm going to put this down. And I drew it out, and it was a power symbol. That's what I call it. And the interesting thing is when I was drawing this shape and these objects out, with symbols, intricate symbols, and there is an image of it on my Instagram. If you scroll through, like it's maybe I'll link it to you guys afterwards. Is there was no creative thought. I built it, and I felt like I was gone mentally from the time I started till the time I finished. And when I finished, this thing was created. I didn't spend any time wondering if this table should be over here, or this symbol should be over there, or this should be blue, or this should be yellow. As soon as I drew it, I colored it the color that I wanted it to be. So it was completely guided in some sense on how to put it down. Then I sit back and realize what I wrote or what I drew, and then I was just like, okay, well, that is weird. What does it mean? There's a bunch of intricate symbols on it. A couple of them are Freemason symbols. There's actually the Tessa symbol, which we have, which is the Sumerian cuneiform of Anu, which is the Tessa symbol. That was in the center. Like there's a whole bunch of things. Then I was trying to interpret what perspective I was looking at it. And then looking down on it, it almost looked as if it was a table with 12 chairs on top of a triangular rug. But then I slept on it, woke up the next day, looked at the symbol, trying to understand it. Then I printed it off, and then I started looking at the symbolism behind the shapes and the colors to find out what the symbols meant. And there was a bunch of intricate meanings behind it. And I was able to interpret what looked to be 12 chairs, which kind of put the philosophy of me that these characteristics with the colors and the symbols on these chairs meant to represent 12 individuals that I need to encounter. And once I established those characteristics, I coincidentally happened to run into some people that actually fit these characteristics, which is strange. And then on top of that, I had this other feeling that there was just more to this puzzle. So I printed it off, and using the rule of 3, I cut it into layers, and I used there's 3 different layers in the image, and I used 3 sheets per each layer to make a 3D object on top of each layer. And when I was done, the object also was converted into a cylindrical disc with multiple colors that could oscillate and rotate on top of a black pyramid. And I do not know where this information came from, but that was why I would say that's an experience, that's a download. Now, the interesting thing too is I was trying to think of a name, and there was letters on there, and it was I have a phone code that I've used for a long time, one of those swipe codes with my finger, and if I were to measure that phone, if I were to use that swiping motion where these letters are, it spells the word east. And I thought that was interesting because I resonate with Masons, and I am actually a Freemason, a 32nd degree Freemason. So I thought that a lot of my Masonic studies was just being interpreted and downloaded into this format for me to kind of grasp the concept, because that's intricate studies as it is. And East resonated because everything comes from the East, which is Iraq and Sumer and all that other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I was thinking about leaving MUFON and creating a different organization, but I didn't know how. But then when I looked at it after MUFON left, after I fell for MUFON, basically they forced me out and all this other stuff. I took another look at this map, and then I started working on Tessa, but I didn't have a name for Tessa. I just started designing it and creating the website and the concept and talking to people about the idea and the philosophy. And then I realized that if I follow the letters, that same letters without doing my phone code that spell out East, that from left to right spells Tessa, Tessa.
Mm-hmm.
But before I came to that realization, I had already preconceived the thought of calling it the Experiencer Support Association. And then to make it easier, then I broke it down and said, let's call it Tessa, Tessa. And then I realized after that was written in sequence on that map.
You got about a minute.
Well,
Oh yeah, we're on time.
and let's
Go
leave
ahead.
it at that because we're going to need to break down the map on the next episode. How about that? Because
We shall, yes.
Yeah,
All
I'm
right. Well,
interested in the
thank you so
specific
much.
geometry. I want to see the geometry. I think it's the key to everything.
It is sacred geometry. It is 100%. And I should show you the 3D object. And I have an engineer who's going to work with me to see if it can lift. And if it can lift, then there's my experience. And I will write a book about that because I do not know where that information.
Excellent. There you go. Well, we will continue this. We will book another time and continue this. And thank you. So one final word. What's your website again? And then we'll call this a day. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Your website is
the www.tessacan.org, TESACAN.org. And I also want to say thank you all for having me. And I believe you're going to have Anna on December 8th, I believe, right?
yes.
Yes. So
I need
will,
to talk to her. Have her email me.
okay. We'll
Yes,
have her,
Anna.
so maybe I'll
Okay.
have some stuff for you then. Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, Ryan. Much love.